Do all board games need to be forever games? You know, those types of games that sit on your bookshelves and impress your friends when they come over to look at it and hit your table maybe once a week like it's some sort of religious experience? Maybe it's okay to buy a game with the understanding that you may only want to play it a dozen times and then maybe never again. We understand that there are video games like that, and certainly movies. Why the hell not board games? Grave of the Fireflies is a brilliant movie, but do you really want to be emotionally destroyed more than once? If a game is able to provide me an immense amount of joy and a wonderful shared experience with my friends for, let's say, a dozen hours or so, that's what I would consider a really good purchase, even if I never want to play the damn thing again. And that is what this list is about. So I'm gonna throw 10 board games at you that I think are super brilliant and that I think you should play, that I'll never want to see on my table again. I really hate myself for putting it on this list and starting with this game, but it's the reason I made the list. Mage Wars is absolutely brilliant, and it's actually my top 100. And you know what? It might stay there despite being on this list because I have so many awesome memories associated with it, which of course was the theme of the top 100. Mage Wars is a tactical two-player pseudo-miniature game, where instead of miniatures, you use cards from a spellbook. In Mage Wars, players play as battling mages duking it out on the battlefield, summoning awesome creatures, casting devastating spells, or just straight up turning into a werewolf and beating the living hell out of your opponent. I love all the shit in this game. Seriously, I think at this point right now, I own like 4 base sets. No, maybe 5. And all the expansions, some multiples. And despite all that junk, the game never felt like it was too much for me. It feels cool like building your spell book. It feels cool finding the exact spell to use for every situation in the game. And it feels cool having that spell sort of manifest into a creature and actually getting, like I said, to move it around and kill your opponent's creatures. The damn game just drips cool, and it is oozing with so much theme. And everything, in my opinion, feels tightly balanced, despite there being a proverbial shit ton of different mages, creatures, and magic types. But I think it's that endless amount of customization that leads me to one of the reasons I don't want to play it again. The game just takes so freaking long. And in 3 hours, I think I'd much rather just play a real miniature game rather than a card game sort of masquerading as a miniature game. Seriously, every miniature game I own, I think plays in less time than this game. The other issue I have is that there is no element of terrain. So the map you sort of move around on, it doesn't really matter that much. And for a game that's sort of trying to emulate a battlefield, even if it is incredibly abstract, to not incorporate the terrain, it's a little wonky. And again, this is something traditional miniature gaming does beautifully. And this game is just a bear to teach. In my top 100, I mentioned I make everybody play this game at some point if they're my friend. And while that was true for a really long time, the veil has sort of been lifted from my eyes. And now, I see that maybe that wasn't the best idea. I would teach this game, which is super complex, to people whose only experience with gaming was like Ticket to Ride. I was so blinded by how much I love the game that I just assumed that they would fall in love just as hard. And sadly, the death of any miniature game, even a pseudo-miniature game, is the inability to find people to play with. I want to keep thinking I'll play it again. Like, it's still sitting in my shelves right now. But now I'm starting to think I'm just lying to myself. I made this video for this exact game as a sort of love letter to the games that I hold so close to my heart and that I now know I have to leave. I kept Merchants and Marauders in my collection for years. Not because I'd ever play it again, but because I loved looking at it and remembering all the good times with my friends that I had with this amazing game. And I remembered that board games are not meant to be photos in a photo album. Merchants and Marauders sees players take on the role of an influential merchant wheeling and dealing across the Caribbean, or a dirty, stinky pirate sinking their best friends for a few doubloons and some laughs. However you seek your glory, the first to 10 is the winner. So set sail and let's move some plastic shit. The beautiful thing about this game is that it truly tells a story. And it's one that everyone at the table gets to share and be involved with. It's not the typical, you sort of read a card and then concoct some sort of false narrative from the text. No, it's telling a story through its mechanics and the actions you take in the game and how others respond. You decide if you want to become a pirate. You decide, where you'll be taking your goods as a merchant. You decide if you want to, mess with your friends. after, 3 hours of investment and burn that friendship bridge to the bloody ground. It is all within your choice. And the player powers, they're good enough to sort of guide you down a particular path without making you feel like you're being sort of railroaded, and that's sort of destroying the whole sandbox feel of the game. Because I think at its heart, that is what the game is. It's this sort of big old golden age of pirating sandbox game that you get to play in and shed buckets and buckets of blood in. And honestly, isn't that what we're all looking for when we sit down with our family on a Sunday board game night and our Sunday best? I think so. But sadly, my family can't play this with me anymore because I did inevitably sell it. It is no longer the piece of art on my shelves I point to and say things like, hey Mark, or you remember that time I ruined your entire game after like 4 hours of solid investment by sinking one of your ships? Wasn't that amazing? Game can be very emotionally taxing if you're playing with the type of people I play with, or mostly if you're just playing with me. But it's not just me. My friends and I can be a little mean, and we will beat down on people with no mercy. And getting killed in this game is a huge detriment that is almost sometimes impossible to come back from. So tension can get a little high when you invested hours and hours into a game, only for it to come crashing down on you. And the worst part is that when that happens, you probably still have another hour or so to play the game. And while that gut-wrenching experience may excite me, I know damn well it's ruining everyone else at the table emotionally, and I don't want my game nights to end in everyone hating me. I save that for the game of unfair. That's when I let it get dirty and have everybody leave the table just absolutely loathing me. Regardless, it's a game worth experiencing, as it really does capture the sort of romanticism and freedom of being a pirate, taking these sort of huge risks and getting massive rewards with a wonderful variety of paths to take to victory that make each game interesting and thrilling. Like, this is the type of game you want to play along with a pirate soundtrack. You put on Pirates of the Caribbean, you attack your friends and then sink their boats and just have a blast singing sea shanties and never ever bathing ever again. Have you ever laid awake at night, sort of tormented by the vastness of the universe and marveled at your absolute insignificance when faced with such eternal depth, and then asked yourself, where the hell is Planet X anyway? And why the hell do I give a shit? In the search for Planet X, you are scientists tasked with attempting to locate the dark and mysterious planet by asking a variety of questions and making observations with logical deduction. The more objects you're able to locate, the closer you get to locating the planet and scoring a bunch of victory points for your findings at the end of the game. There is a lot to like about this game, and despite the fact that I'll never play it again, it is a wonderfully clever game that I praise out loud every single time I play it. The setup is easy and fast, explaining the game is relatively quick and simple, the app integrates amazingly, and it makes perfect sense. Every game provides me with the same fulfillment as finishing a Sudoku while sitting on the shitter, and that is a beautiful thing. What's cool is that the game never leaves you feeling overwhelmed. Most clues you gather throughout the game typically feel somewhat connected, as if you're following this intricately crafted breadcrumb trail. And yeah, you might once or twice in the game follow the wrong path, but you'll never feel completely lost, and that's an incredibly well-designed accomplishment. It's easily the best pure deduction game I've ever played, a truly satisfying puzzle that I appreciate, and yet I never want to see it again in my entire life. When I sit down to play a board game, I'm not sitting down to engage in pure deductive reasoning. I'm not Sherlock Holmes, okay? I want to throw some dice, I want to make some cool moves, play overpowered cards and push some plastic around and mess other people's shit up whenever possible. I'm not sitting down to solve a Wordle and then after solving, message my friends in a group chat to see if I solved it faster than them, just so I can feel better about myself. I solved today's in 2 guesses. I'd much rather play something like Cryptid or Awkward Guest, because both of those games scratch that sort of deductive reasoning itch, but both are able to provide me something more gamified, like a way to interact with other people at the table, aside from simply listening to what they're asking. I want to feel like I'm playing a board game. This is kept in my collection because it's on Kim's top 10 games. She absolutely loves it. But I make sure never to mention it again so I don't have to play it. And I hope she just kind of forgets about it and doesn't watch this video because I'm a bad person and I'm selfish. I don't care where Planet X is anymore. I found it once or twice and now I'm done. I don't want to know. I never want to know. Don't even tell me where it is because I'll just ignore you. Remember that show with the sexy robot lady in the red dress? Well, with the game Battlestar Galactica, you get to be her and perform a series of mundane tasks, all while accusing everyone but yourself of being a less sexy killer robot. In Battlestar Galactica, players take on the role of their favorite TV characters, each with their own unique part to play, working together to keep humanity alive. They do this by solving little puzzles around the board and putting out constant fires, all while trying to determine who the traitor is among them. Battlestar Galactica at this point is an absolute classic. It's a really, really well done cooperative game where each member feels impactful to the overall mission. Everyone will usually have their task that they sort of like hyper focus on, and then once they're done, everyone comes together to discuss who did their job the worst and therefore is obviously a killer robot and not just an incompetent boob. Actually, that's kind of what I enjoy the most about any of these sort of traitor games, is the fact that there is always one person who everyone thinks is the traitor, but he has to do his absolute best to convince them of the truth, which is that he's not the traitor, he just sucks. That happens in every traitor game I have ever played. I can safely say that there are a few other games that incorporate the theme so amazingly as Battlestar. In the early days of first playing this game, it really did feel as if you were on a ship, sort of being bombarded by life and death events, while simultaneously trying to deal with the fact that someone on your ship is a giant asshole and is ruining everything. It really captures that sort of dread and paranoia that slowly builds up over time as shit starts hitting the fan. And you're left wondering, if Mark wasn't able to kill that Cylon ship because of bad luck or because he's the Cylon. And hell, even at the start of a game, I'm having fun. Like, there wasn't a single game where my heart didn't skip a beat, just a little, in excitement when I flipped over the card to see what role I'd be playing for the next, 3 hours. It's fun during the game to try to play the detective, sort of determining, who's pulling their weight and who seems to be actively working against the group, as it is fun to sort of deceive others into thinking you're contributing, when really you're sort of you're that guy on the group project who isn't doing a damn thing, but you're still going to put your name on that bristle board and stand silent during the presentation, and you get all the same marks. This game is really, really long, and it's one hell of a time investment. And the older I get, the less likely I am to play a game that's going to take 3 hours. And so perhaps just loving it as I do Battlestar it's not enough. I need to consider the game like the second coming for it to hit my table when I know it's going to be the only game I play for that night. And Battlestar, it just doesn't do it for me like that. I guess over time, I stopped finding the stuff you have to do on the ship particularly interesting, whether that's as a Cylon or one of the humans. The tasks, they're rather tedious and they're not fully engaging. But what I find funny is that I wouldn't suggest this is a bad game because of that. It really only puts more emphasis on the fun and excitement of a hidden traitor, right? Because if you put too much into the other mechanics, you may inadvertently take away from what essentially is the heart of the game. And if you really like that dynamic, this game is a must play because it really is brilliant. I'm super happy that it did at one point really excite me to play this game every single time and just spend, endless hours playing with friends. Hell, my friends hate the fact that I sold it. But with Battlestar, I was honest with myself and I knew that while I did love it, I just didn't want to see it on my table again. And, it had its impact. It was just time to say goodbye, and I'm not just saying that because selling the game helped me fund a down payment for a home. Now on to the game I've never owned because my friend makes me play it every time I go to his house. The Quacks of Quedlinburg. In Quacks of Quedlinburg, players take on the role of charlatans, mixing their own secret brews by drawing ingredients from their bag and adding it to their pot, utilizing special powers and doing their best to avoid spoiling the whole mixture by drawing too many bad ingredients. I think Quacks is a wonderfully fun and engaging experience, despite the relatively non-existent interaction between other players. However, most turns you are looking at other people pulling tiles from their bags in anticipation, sort of secretly hoping they'll fail, or openly hoping that they'll fail because like I said at the start, I am an asshole. Hell, I'm generally in suspense on my own turn. Sort of like agonizing over whether I should pull just one more tile from my bag and risk going bust, or just push it to get more victory points and money, because if you bust in this game, you can't have both. You have to pick, which can make for a fun little agonizing decision. And there was enough variety there between games provided by the special powers that I mentioned to make every game feel really different. Hell, even the catch-up mechanic, while typically I'm not a big fan of, it does work really well here, and it makes you feel like you have a shot, but at the same time not making the leader feel like he just had his ass handed to him by a blue shell. While you may not get hit by that blue shell, you can have some bad luck, and I mean really bad luck. Having bad luck in this game just plants this ever-growing hatred seed inside my soul that just gets bigger and bigger with every play. You start looking over at other people taking risks that make no logical sense and just getting rewarded over and over again. Meanwhile, you're using your one-time potion to negate the shit you just pulled, only to pull something else that's just as shit, even though you have 20 other non-shit tiles in your bag that you could have pulled. It's damn near infuriating, and the game just doesn't give me that adequate control that I'd like over my fate. I'm fine with some luck, I really am, but give me more to feel like I'm not at the mercy of some alchemist luck demon just shitting on my very soul with every turn. The game drives me absolutely nuts, and while funny enough, I'd recommend it to people new to the hobby, I never want to play it again. I never want to play it again. So Mark, I know you're watching. Don't ask me to play this game again. I love it. I really do. I don't want to see it again. My sanity needs a break from this game because honestly, I can't afford the therapist bills, Inflation, it's a killer. Now for the game that ends up in 100% of content creators' games for Halloween lists that pop up in droves every October. Mansions of Madness. Mansions of Madness is a fully cooperative game of horror and mystery where players team up to explore the haunted mansion, collect important items, solve head-scratching puzzles, talk to sketchy NPCs, and solve the mystery before perishing or going completely insane. It really does feel like you're in this sort of haunted house uncovering a mystery. And that's an amazing feat for a board game to really capture. This really is one of the definitive Halloween games for a very good reason. It's a thematic as hell and just a ton of fun with the right atmosphere and the right player group. And what's cool is that there is enough variety in the starter box to keep you entertained for many hours. My issue with the game, although I love it, is that the turns themselves, they're relatively simple and straightforward. Over time, you really don't feel like you're making important decisions that, you can look back on after you've failed and think, hey man, if I just would have done this other thing instead, we would have won. That would have won us the game. Turns typically feel pretty obvious, and I think that type of experience, at least in my opinion, has a very limited shelf life. It's fun while it lasts, but that fun won't last forever. So the reason I don't want to play this game again is the same reason I don't want to do, the same escape room again. Even though there is still more content out there that I have not tried, the general feeling remains the same from expansion to expansion. It really is a brilliant game, and remember that after you've liked and subscribed to the channel, donate $1 to me every time you see it on someone's top 10 Halloween games list. If I got $1 for every time that appeared, I'd be a millionaire in a week, for sure. Do you remember Nations? The game that's ranked 237 on Board Game Geek, and yet I never hear anyone discuss this game anymore, which I think is a damn shame because it truly is one of the best civilization games out there. In Nations, players take on the role of a civilization and guide them through the historical ages, providing your people with food and stability while progressing economically and militarily to amaze the world through your achievements and build your heritage as the greatest nation in human history. I've always been attracted to civilization-style games. I just love them, whether it's video games like Civ, or Age of Empires, or board games like Through the Ages or Mosaic. I love the idea of taking this sort of fledgling civilization and then building them up ever so slowly, morphing them into the perfect, economic or military powerhouse by picking the perfect technologies and making the best moves. Nations lets me do that in less time than Through the Ages. And for that, I love it. And while we are comparing the two, Nations is definitely the cuddlier version of Through the Ages. Through the Ages can be very mean when you want it to be, with an abundance of military cards, wars, skirmishes, and soldiers. Instead, Nations conflict comes primarily from the scarcity of the resources available in the game. Sometimes you'll want to build that wonder quickly, but there will only be a set number of architects available at the start of any given round. So in that way, it becomes a fairly tight race. And while it may stress some people out, I find that to be a very enjoyable experience. It's funny, I actually picked this up because I was playing so much Through the Ages that I wanted a game that was similar but different. You would think I'd play something that's entirely different altogether, but no, I wanted something a bit quicker to play in between the times that I played Through the Ages. But that sort of brings me to the reason I won't play this game again. It's not Through the Ages. I would actually recommend this game to most gamers over Through the Ages. I really would. But for me, the game just hits so much harder and is so much more enjoyable than Nations. Even though like I said, I really love Nations, and I'm really grateful I was able to find something that played a little shorter. But in my opinion, it just couldn't stand next to the beauty and grandeur that is Through the Ages. Face it, you've never played Runewars. It's one of those games you've seen in the big coffin box at your local game stores, and you thought to yourself, no, I don't think I want that taking up space on my bookshelf. But that is your loss, because Runewars is an amazing game. Runewars is an epic board game of conquest, adventure, and fantasy that sees players fighting for key territory through battle and area control, where they must gather resources, raise distinct and powerful armies, and lay siege to heavily fortified cities. They do all this in the race to collect 10 dragon stones. This is like one of those epic video games like Heroes Might and Magic, where you strap in and you get ready to play for hours and hours, moving your plastic dudes around and doing just tons and tons of cool shit. It is exactly something I would have loved to play as a child. Granted, I would have got almost all the rules wrong, but honestly, I probably get tons of rules wrong already in this game every single time I play, because there are a lot of rules in this game. To start, you pick your faction and then do whatever it takes to acquire as many dragon runes as possible, whether that's, taking over enemy territory, sending your heroes on a sort of stealth mission to fulfill epic quest, or just manipulating key events to your advantage. Runewars feels like this weird and scary Frankenstein monster with just a slew of stitched together parts from other board games. It's an adventure game, and it's a war game, and it's a goddamn beautiful and it's a horrifying monstrosity. Everything in the game just comes together to make this sort of crazy fantasy world come alive. Being able to recruit the neutrals on the map is always a mechanic that makes me excited, because it's just Heroes of Might and Magic. The problem is this is one of those games you can really only play maybe once a year, if that. And the difficulty with that is that, unlike something like, say, Twilight Imperium, the rules here are not intuitive at all, and the rulebook is a bloody nightmare. I have difficulty keeping that giant tome of guidelines in my head between plays. So in order to play again, I sort of have to go back and reread the whole damn thing, and I don't have time for that. This game, more than any other game, truly feels like that Cones of Dunshire joke from Parks and Rec. Half the time I'm explaining it to people, I'm not even sure I understand what the hell I'm saying. But the funny thing is, that's sort of what I love for it. I love the fact that it's a bloated mess of mechanics. I said this many times on this channel, that I embrace an overabundance of rules and mechanics and things to keep track of, but I do need those mechanics and rules to be mildly intuitive. I like being overwhelmed by choices and mechanics, but I don't like pouring through one of the worst written manuals in human history. Maybe this was a game that I got to enjoy so much because I was younger, had a bit more energy and more time to really appreciate, the sort of the beauty of this mechanical monstrosity. Maybe I'm just Danny Glover now, maybe I'm too old for this shit. Regardless, I have awesome memories associated with this game. And while it will never be a game I recommend to almost anybody, I do still think it's an amazing game and it's a brilliant experience. Ever watched Scooby-Doo and thought to yourself, man, what if instead of using reasoning and zany hijinks to solve the mystery, you just used abstract paintings on cards and suppressed your urge to yell at your friends for not understanding your clues? Well, now you can do that in Mysterium. Mysterium is an asymmetric cooperative game where you either play as the vengeful ghost, trying to lead other players toward your killer, or one of the psychics, using the clues that the ghost provides them to solve the murder mystery. Trying to communicate to people on your team using very abstract images it's a lot of fun, and everyone playing this game always has a good time at my table. You know, it's nice to have a game in your collection that's a little outside the box in regards to its mechanics and its overall theme. The artwork is of course beautiful, and the amount of detail in every picture is exactly what you want in a game like this. The funniest moments in this game are when you hand someone what you think is the most obvious clue imaginable, but they're looking so deeply at all the shit on the card that they're ignoring, you know, sort of like the forest from the trees, and thinking that the little object in the background is somehow symbolic of something bigger. It's like, no, Kim, that's not even art on the card. That's just a coffee stain. It's frustrating, but it's a hell of a lot of fun. And the game does deliver on that sort of cooperative aspect because you are encouraged to help others to try to guess their clues. When you guess right, you really do feel like you've worked together and solved a pretty unique and fun puzzle. The thing I really dislike about this game, though, is that token you place on someone else's guess when you think they got their guess wrong. It seems counterintuitive to the cooperative nature of the experience. It's like the game expects you to just like jump up after someone gets it wrong and yell, "Aha, I told you, you are an idiot. Guess better, you moron." Like it's a weird experience. And sadly now the game feels just a little convoluted for what it is. I just want to go back to Dixit. The extra bits that I have to set up and the extra components and mechanics I need to explain to new players, and I do typically just play this with newcomers, it's just not worth it for myself in the long run because I can have pretty similar level of fun with a much simpler game like Dixit. Despite all that, I really do feel like this is a brilliant game that's worth owning, even if it does have a limited amount of time to provide that enjoyment before it inevitably dies and then leaves you colorful clues as to who killed it. Do you like the History Channel? Do you like Battle? Do you like gluing hundreds upon hundreds of tiny little stickers to wooden blocks? Well, you should play Command & Colors Ancients because you can do just those things. In Command & Colors Ancients, players face off against one another on ancient battlefields using a unique historical wargame system driven by perfectly played cards that dictate how you should move your tight formations of soldiers to battle across a wide variety of fun and historical scenarios. The game has far more depth than Memoir 44 or Battle Cry or Battle Lore. Once you understand the basic card mechanics, there's just so much more room for strategic decision making that I find very satisfying. You know, it's my favorite of the whole bunch for sure. Plus, it feels more grown up. You know, like you're playing with silly plastic while I'm moving around wooden blocks because I'm cultured. It does a brilliant job at simulating that sort of tight rank and file of historical battles. You know, I say this like I know a damn thing about them. I mean, beyond every other dude who obviously thinks about Rome, 10 to 12 times a day. Do you remember that meme? Topical. But it does genuinely feel like I'm a general moving around these very tightly formed battle lines and doing my absolute best to outthink and outmaneuver my opponent. And the leader cards are great because they force you to sort of keep this cohesive units under the command of the leader in order to properly utilize the cards. The whole experience just makes the gameplay an empowering endeavor where you feel like you're always provided meaningful and impactful choices, where you constantly have to adapt to both what your opponent is doing and the choices in movement on a given turn due to your cards. Now, unfortunately, much like the game that I started this list with, CNC makes me want to play a miniature game. And that's no fault to the game itself. It is an amazing, amazing game. But every time I play it, I typically think to myself, like, man, I own a lot of shorter miniature games that I could probably be playing that I think simulate battle maybe a little better. And I'm not saying that because I'm a plastic whore who loves painting my little army men to make guests come to my house and sort of praise me when they see my little dudes that I display in the dining room, like the classy gentleman I am. Like when my grandparents pass, I will inherit precious heirlooms. When I pass, my grandchildren will inherit colorful plastic men. And I think we know who the real winner here is. And the scenarios themselves don't feel entirely unique enough for me because, it could be because I'm coming from a miniature gaming background where things can take a little bit more liberty and get a bit more wild with the objectives that you have to complete for the match. Regardless, I do highly recommend this game if you're a board gamer. Everyone should own a copy, despite the dreadful commitment of putting on those goddamn stickers. It's this beautiful mid-ground between miniature gaming and board gaming. Plus, it gives you something to talk about with those weird war game freaks and their tiny little cardboard tokens. When they start talking shit about, like, you know, how cool Combat Commander Europe is, you can be like, well, I play C&C Ancients, so I am also cool too. I'm just kidding, of course. None of us are cool. So to wrap it up, do I regret purchasing any of these games? Hell no. Hell no. Every game on this list is one that provided me an incredible amount of fun, albeit for a relatively small time frame. And you know what? That's perfectly okay. Not every game needs to last forever. So that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. Hit like and subscribe and all that stuff, and I'll see you in the next one.